Hello there, I'm Gloria Makarenko, and happy Halloween to all you ghosts and goblins. This is Our Vancouver. Coming up, saving BC's rainforests might actually preserve more than just the trees. And spooky designer Halloween treats. But first, get swept up in a local artisan's family lore. Now, what do you think? Are they works of art? Are they functional household items? Or maybe a Halloween witch's favorite ride? Well, there is a Vancouver broom maker that says her creations are all of those things. And Mary Schwieger has been making and selling old-timey brooms at the Granville Island Broom Company for more than a decade now. Mary, welcome.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here. And I know your sister Sarah couldn't be with us today, but how did this all start for you and your family?
Well, so it's something that my sister and I grew up with. We grew up in the Kootenays, and my parents were broom makers out there for many years. But they learned from friends of theirs, and those friends learned from someone from a Shaker village on the East Coast.
Wow, okay, so where do you even start when you're making a broom? Because I know you brought in some of the raw materials for us here.
Yeah,
So
let's grab some of those. Basically,
I've loaded up the counter here. Okay.
It's a type of sorghum, also known as broom corn, and it's grown in northern Mexico, but it's just amazingly strong and flexible fiber.
Okay, and what about some of the tools that you use?
Yeah. So we use all of our tools and equipment is mostly antique. This is just a broom pounder. Sometimes you have to pound it into shape or pound a nail in. These are sewing cuffs to allow you to push needles through the brooms to stitch them flat. So yeah, a lot of our equipment and machinery comes from the 1800s.
Okay, and you actually not only demonstrate, these brooms are made in your shop on Granville Island.
Exactly. When people come in and watch us work, it's less of a demonstration and more just us doing our production in front of people.
Okay, I love it. So why don't we go through some of these brooms and tell me what some of these are, what is their function, I guess. I'm dropping more little pieces here. This one is gorgeous.
Yeah, so that is a turkey wing style whisk, and it's a classic old style whisk broom. But you basically have to build it by hand, so you don't see it anymore. We just add one little chunk of fiber as we go, so it fans it out into a beautiful broom, but it's also super practical and nice to use.
Well, I see. Okay, how long would it take you to put this together?
One of those aren't too bad, like, 10 minutes or something of just binding, and there's no drying time or anything with those, so those are a really fast one. Most of the brooms are a week-long process, essentially.
Week-long, okay. Describe this one for us, because the wood is beautiful, and I don't know, it is a gorgeous piece.
Yeah, so this one is very cool because it's actually local BC arbutus wood from a friend's property. If friends of ours have like a branch that falls or something like that, that's the only time we can ever get arbutus. So that's always exciting. And then the broom itself, we have to basically sort the fiber to different sizes and qualities, soak it in hot water so that it's pliable enough to work with, and then slowly bind it on. We weave it, that's the last step of binding it on.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So this is woven. The actual fibers are woven.
Exactly. So they'll be quite waterlogged when we're doing the work, and so you're lifting every second stem and weaving your way along, and then we cut it off when we're done, and we hang it to dry for 5 days before we can actually then go on and finish them.
They're absolutely gorgeous. Seriously. So what would something like this, and this is just some fibers wound together.
Yeah, a simple little bundle of fibers. It's a scrub brush. So we use our scrub brushes for carrots and potatoes. You can use them on things like cast iron pans. We have the softer one here that's good for mushrooms, so it's a little more gentle. So if you're like a mushroom gatherer and you just want to dust them off.
Absolutely gorgeous. Tell me about some of the, come on over here. And then, so we've got some round ones, we've got some flat ones. What are their practical uses now?
Yeah, so there's quite a big difference between the round and the flat broom, and part of it is just the era. Before the early 1800s, all brooms were round.
Yes.
So trimmed or untrimmed on the ends, but basically just a round broom. It either covers a large area at once, or it really kind of digs in if it's trimmed off. The flat broom is your more modern broom. So when they decided to start fanning them out, then you started getting that more coverage at once, so more efficient, but also a lot of control. So that's kind of your all-purpose broom of today.
I see. So Who buys these brooms?
One thing we love is it's pretty much anyone and everyone. There's really no demographic or type of people that buy our brooms, and they buy them for practical reasons as well as more decorative and fun reasons. And so really we just get the widest possible range.
I want to hear about your house. How many functional brooms do you use in your home space?
So I am both a minimalist and live in a 600 square foot Vancouver condo.
Okay.
But I have a floor broom, a flat one.
Show us one of those. Okay.
So it's actually a slightly compact, smaller size to this, and it's got a natural branch handle, so a little fancier.
Yes.
But yeah, so basically this is your practical floor broom. So I have one of those. I have one cobwebber. And there is a cobwebber around here. Yes, one of these. So basically the idea with the cobwebber is you're just reaching up and like getting things from the corners. So they're really handy.
Look at this. Look at this.
This is a manzanita wood handle, so also very beautiful, but very, very handy as well. So I have this, I have a scrub brush, and I have the turkey wing style whisk. Those are kind of my key brooms.
And we could maybe play Quidditch with this one if you're looking or a witch's broom.
That is definitely our most popular type of broom. This is a rustic birch broom. Round ends is definitely our old witchy style. Very popular for like TV and film for witches' brooms.
Come on over here. I just want to know, like, how does it feel, Mary, to carry on this family tradition?
It's a lot of fun. It's one thing. We can share it kind of within our family. My parents are retired now, but my cousin also makes brooms in the Kootenays still, so he carried on their business. So it's a fun family thing that we all get to sort of share together, and also just a rare historical craft. So I really enjoy that we can carry on doing something that's practical. It builds long-lasting brooms, it makes it more sustainable and things like that. So.
I see. And we see your sister and a friend dressed up as witches there.
Yeah, that's Sarah and Stephanie. And Stephanie has been with us for like a decade working in our shop. So yeah.
Do you have a Halloween costume planned?
I actually don't. I've been too busy. The shop is really backed up right now.
Well, you've already got part of the costume at hand.
It's easy to pull together for us.
That's
so
an easy
no
one.
problems there.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This has been so enlightening. I didn't realize this was all happening right there on Granville Island. So nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Hi, Manisa.
Hi, I'm Greg, and you're in the Shipyards District, and you're watching
Our Vancouver.
Time for one of our favorite features. Yes, this is where we get to showcase some of the photographs that you send in. Let's start with this one. Some beautiful fall colors sent in by Wayne Parsons near Clinton. That's a perfect autumn moment. Thank you. Norm Stack has outdone himself with this one. A pair of coyotes running wild on the Richmond Dike. Just amazing to see. And finally, this stunner from Janelle Coig on Paul Lake near Kamloops. Just gorgeous. That really is picture perfect. And do keep them coming. You can email us your favorite photographs, bcphotos@cbc.ca. That's bcphotos@cbc.ca. It could soon vanish like a ghost. A local glacier responsible for some of the water flowing into Coquitlam's taps, it's disappearing fast. So we took a flight over top for a look at what it means for water conservation in Metro Vancouver.
But I know when I first came here in 2006, where I'm standing, this was covered in ice here, or a 1 or 2 meter thick of ice.
The Coquitlam Glacier is nestled on its deathbed. It's more than 1,400 meters high in elevation, far above the Coquitlam watershed. This glacier is the last one standing among a number that formed centuries ago in Metro Vancouver. Today, during the warmer seasons, the runoff provides about 2% of the water in the Coquitlam Reservoir. But that won't be the case for much longer.
This ice is thinning and it's going to decay fairly rapidly. It's one of our best climate indicators of change. And I don't expect this glacier to last past 2050, really.
We found the glacier glistening under 20-degree heat because of unusual summer-like conditions into October. From above, the warning signs are everywhere. The water levels visibly low, the cedars reddening, and a stripe of gray smoke stretching across the sky from the wildfire burning at Manning Park. Scientists are here to measure how fast the glacier is melting using LiDAR technology.
Those markers were the edge of the snow.
Okay, and that's how
So
much
in
it's
2
dropped.
weeks it's
eh?
dropped and
Yeah.
receded that much.
Wow.
The ice has actually dropped 2 to even 5 meters in just 2 weeks. A lot of that is seasonal snow melt at the top of the glacier, but it's certainly struggling in these warm and dry conditions.
Roughly 200 years ago, during the Little Ice Age, the glacier used to spread past where the point I'm standing to near the edge of that valley. And it used to be way higher, but now it's been reduced to running water during this time of year when it's not snowing.
This is a heavier downstream flow than usual at this time of year, courtesy of the warmer weather. But much of this water will soak into the ground before making it to the rivers. And the water that does make it to the reservoir is not enough to replenish it.
But it's something, and with these glaciers disappearing, that source of water is then gone.
Once the glacier is gone, Marshall says the Coquitlam Reservoir will rely primarily on rainfall.
And we know our precipitation patterns are changing with climate change.
All factors going into long-term water planning.
So I think it's important to look at this, realize how quickly these resources are disappearing. And this is, a sign of what's happening elsewhere in North America for sure, but around the world. And think about how we can conserve our water, our drinking water, as we move into the future.
It's an endangered species, right? And it's an iconic image of what's happening in the region.
At this point, there's no stopping the Coquitlam Glacier's death spiral. What's left of it serves as a stark reminder of challenging times ahead, pushing humanity into uncharted waters. Ali Patarga, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, right here in BC is a rare old-growth forest that is also home to endangered mountain caribou. Now, saving that rainforest might actually help keep the herd alive, but trying to find a balance between logging and preservation, that's not easy.
Across Revelstoke Lake, in the interior of the province, a rare ecosystem remains, a rainforest, more than 1,000 years old.
This inland temperate rainforest, which extends from Nelson, BC up to Prince George, is unique in the world. It's like the Amazon of the north. On the coast, we have huge old-growth trees like at Fairy Creek, which is in the media, but these forests are often forgotten. It's one of the only places in the world where there's heavy rainfall. There's more than 200 centimeters a year of precipitation here, and that's what allows these trees to grow quickly and remain big for centuries, because there's very little disturbance, very little fire.
The unique forest also serves as habitat for the mountain caribou.
They rely on old-growth forests for protection from predators and for their own food supply.
Robert Seruya is the director of the Caribou Monitoring Unit. Today, he's working on mapping herds' movement in the area, trying to get a sense of where the caribous are and where they're going.
These stands are protected because of cooperative land use planning between government, industry, and other stakeholders.
50,000 hectares have been protected in this area, all because the caribou use this land and travel through it. Without that protection, these trees would be at risk. Just a few miles away, centuries-old trees lie on the ground. They're on unprotected land.
And so this is hemlock, and these trees are likely going to go make toilet paper.
This conservationist saw firsthand the decline of the caribou in the region.
I grew up at the foot of the South Purcell Mountains, and those caribou are gone now. And the caribou that I once knew and the places that I roamed when they were around, they're just not the same anymore. We've seen that, as habitat destruction moves into these valleys, we've watched from south to north as caribou populations have declined. Right now we're sitting in the Kootenay and Columbia region, and we've had 5 caribou herds go extinct, locally extinct, since 2014.
These fallen trees lie within a logging deferral zone, a temporary measure while the province works on a new approach to forestry. But stopping the harvest isn't that easy.
There's no actual legal implementation of the deferral or legal mechanism of the deferral, it relies on companies having goodwill to not log in those areas.
The company operating on this site says it has reduced, but not stopped, its old-growth logging.
The government is basically saying, you don't have to defer this area until we tell you. So they haven't told us that yet. But we are voluntarily trying to avoid as much of it as possible.
And a deferral would have a big impact on this operator.
So that's like 18 years of harvesting for us that's been deferred.
But he knows the future of logging looks very different. Taking trees from areas like this, planted 45 years ago, that's what logging will look like in the years to come.
We're making a new plan, but it takes a little bit of time.
That transition to second growth harvesting is happening too slowly for environmental groups.
They can evolve and they can move forward as we make transitions, and we can also build a more sustainable forest industry for workers.
Today, Robert Seruya isn't hearing the presence of caribou, but he believes working together can help protect the herds that continue to dwindle in the region.
So the old growth deferrals were done largely for old growth itself, not for caribou habitat quality or values. My suggestion would have been to integrate the two teams, the old growth team and the caribou team, to try and get some win-wins.
Camille Vernet, Radio-Canada, Revelstoke.
Coming up, Science Smart's Johanna Wagstaff will be here to show us why trees are so important when it comes to capturing carbon from the atmosphere.
Trees play a major role in the natural process of how carbon moves around planet Earth, the carbon cycle. Let's start with their role in helping us out with CO2, photosynthesis. The leaves from growing trees pull in CO2 from the atmosphere, the same CO2 we breathe out, and yes, the same CO2 released from burning fossil fuels. Add light and water, and then leaves turn this 3-ingredient recipe into sugars used by the trees to grow. The waste product of this chemical reaction, oxygen, is re-released back into the atmosphere for us to breathe. Carbon remains locked inside the tree. Actually, scratch that. Carbon is the tree. The trunk, branches, leaves, and roots are all made up of tiny blocks of carbon. So when you look up at a giant Douglas fir, you are looking at a tower of carbon. CO2 is what gives it mass. When a tree dies, it feeds most of that carbon back into the soil as it decomposes, which in turn helps other trees.
To see the fluorescent light that's emitted from plants all over the world, we have to use scientific instruments that are placed on satellites.
So for the past few million years or so, trees have been doing a great job of pulling out excess CO2 in our atmosphere. Where the trouble began is when humans started producing too much CO2 for the trees to take in. Add to that, a warming climate means more intense wildfires, drought, pests, basically all the things that can kill trees. And that's why trees can't do it alone. And now, you're Science Smart. If you have a science question on your mind, send me an email and I'll try to get it answered.
Thank you so much, Johanna. You are watching Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now, if you ask our next guest if she wants a Halloween trick or treat, my bet is that she's going for something sweet. Petra Švestková makes the most exquisite cakes and pastries for the Vancouver pastry shop, Buttermere. Petra, hello there.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, and thank you for bringing such beautiful cakes along, too, and we get to do a little bit of decorating in a minute. But what would you say Buttermere is all about? What sets it apart?
So we mainly focus to bring people different kind of the taste and the design of our cake. So in particular, we often draw to the flavors inspiration from the Asian flavors. Because our owner and the head pastry chef Jamie is originally from Taiwan. where she's there, so she's looking for new flavors and ideas.
Okay, what kinds of flavors do you mean?
Like hojicha, assam tea, matcha tea, and of course there are many exotic fruits like yuzu, for example.
I see. And what about for you? How did you get into baking and cake making in the first place?
So everything started in my grandma kitchen because she always make a birthday cake for all of her grandchildren. So I really enjoyed the time and spent just the time with her at the kitchen.
And where was that?
It was in the Czech Republic.
In Czech Republic?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was your favorite cake at the time, when it was your birthday, when your birthday came around?
It was usually just vanilla sponge with buttercream and marmalade. So pretty easy.
Okay, now we've got some images around here of some cakes for the season, particularly for Halloween. Do we get to do some decorating, or do you want to describe what we've got here? What's this one? This blue, the blue blob?
So here we have our witch cauldron cake that contains the pop rock Florentine crunch on the bottom, then butterfly pea flour strawberry sponge. Inside is the blueberry jelly. Around it's zephyr caramel mousse and covered with the glaze, and on the top is...
Oh my, there's all kinds of surprises in there. But this is, again, when you talk about blueberry, this is almost like a giant blueberry that's been kind of condensed or squished a little bit here. Is there sort of, is the witch edible too?
Yeah, it's from chocolate.
That's a chocolate witch. And what about this one? How would you describe this one?
So it's our boobesh cake. The inspiration goes from the local pumpkin patches.
Okay.
So on the inside the cake, you can see the black velvet sponge, roasted kombucha namelaka. It's covered with the Swiss buttercream. On the top, it's some chocolate drippings and some sweets.
There's so much goodness inside there, and we're just seeing the outside package. Wait, do we get to do a little bit of decorating here? We got to be. This is going to be the rapid decoration. What are you? You start, because I'm incredibly intimidated.
Okay, I will start with the chocolate dripping. So we just.
What are you going to make? This chocolate drip. This is going to be. You're making this into a little bit of a Halloween kind of cake. Is that okay? So, but you're still doing a really nice job. Isn't there supposed to be something that looks a little bit like, I don't know, like messy or ghoulish about it? Or it doesn't matter. It's still beautiful. Look at that's perfect on the fly.
So you can add the buttercream on the top, just pipe here.
Just piping?
Yeah, just add some butter. Yeah, on the top and more on the. Pretty fun.
Oh, I could do it like that. Okay, that wasn't fancy. That's just so we have something to make it stick to. Is that it?
Yeah.
What's this? Black.
It's
this looks black.
Charcoal streusel that we adding on the top.
Charcoal what?
Streusel.
Okay.
It's
crumbs.
It's crunchy.
Oh, streusel. I see. Okay, ideal.
And now we have the shortbread cookies. So we
shortbread cookies.
Adding like here.
Okay, I can put some ghosts in there. We just put them anywhere.
Yeah.
So these are already. Do you bake these separately, or could you buy these already pre-made if you're making? Or
we're making everything from scratch.
Sorry, of course. This is the bakery. What am I saying? So, what do you love about Halloween?
About Halloween, it's pretty funny.
Do you dress up?
No, it's not like a typical for my
Not in the Czech. They don't do that in Czech Republic. Okay, but you know
I enjoy it here, really.
You do. How about one of these skeleton things? Can we stick one of those in there?
You can try.
You think? Can we try? Well, wait a second. You've got these little skeleton, and you've also got a coffin.
Yeah, like a mummy and a skull.
I know. We got to put them on there. Oh, that's
so
gonna. I don't want it to.
You can buy it for children's.
Right.
When they came for a trick or treat.
Or for adults, because I might have to bite into one of these.
Yeah. I also love chocolate, so.
Okay, so where do people get to find these cakes? Where are you located in Vancouver?
So we are located on a main street.
Yes.
We don't have the front store,
right?
But we are based out of the Torafuku restaurant.
Torafuku. So you would go online, order your cakes, and then pick it up at Torafuku. Do we get to try this? Look at it. This is dying to find out what's inside there. You got to get a close up on this, Richard. This is the moment. Okay, I know I messed things up by sticking extra things in there.
No worries.
See, all those descriptions, we don't really know until we see what's inside. Is the first piece always the hardest? Yeah. Look at that. This is gorgeous.
Do you want to also cut the cake?
You can, yes, cut it.
To see what is inside.
We want to cut the blue one too. Let me just try this one and then we'll straight.
Of course.
It's got a little bit of a crunch on it, too.
Yeah.
Oh, and maybe that's from the streusel, the chocolate streusel you put up there. One more.
So, yeah.
Look at how beautiful that. That is just gorgeous. That is just, I can't wait to try this one. Okay. Petra, happy Halloween to you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much.
One more bite to finish things off.
Of course.
This one is gorgeous. Take good care. Happy Halloween.
Thank you, you too.
You better get up for your mama.
If you'd like to get out and see some live music, indie folk favorite and founding member of the Be Good Tanyas, Frazee Ford is going to play the Commodore Ballroom November 4th. An indie band hailing from Montreal, Fleece, is going to be at the Biltmore Cabaret November 6th.
Hey, I'm Grant Lawrence from CBC Music, here with something a little different for you this week from an award-winning Prairie Roots musician who is constantly taking on new artistic pursuits, like, say, a 5-part mini-series radio play-style musical podcast inspired by the true story of her intrepid great-grandmother. More on that in a bit, but first, here's Little Miss Higgins in her natural habitat. From her 2017 album of the same name, that is Little Miss Higgins, with My Home, My Heart, filmed in and around Manitoba. Little Miss Higgins is a self-described musician, mother, lover, songwriter, and storyteller who was born in Brooks, Alberta, raised in Independence, Kansas, and is currently living in St. Anne, Manitoba.
You drift like the breeze into my bed. You roll like the north wind into my head. We navigate our way in the dark, and I'm drawn to you like a needle to the pole star.
That is Little Miss Higgins performing at Winnipeg's legendary club, Times Change, the High and Lonesome Club on Main Street in 2020, when the club was closed during the pandemic. Speaking of which, Little Miss Higgins had been planning a touring theater show, but when the pandemic shutdown occurred, she pivoted to create what has become both an album and a 5-part historical podcast, as I mentioned, based on her great-grandmother's trek from a small island off the north coast of France to the plains of the Canadian prairies. It's called The Fire Waltz.
I was born in France, then Papa took a chance, and we moved to Jersey Island. We owned no house, and we owned no land, when we moved to this rock in the sea. When we moved to this rock in the sea. With wooden shoes on rented land, we worked long hours all by hand. Potato season would last 6 weeks, and when we were done, we dug up the beats. The sea takes me away from you, away from all the things that I once knew.
That's Little Miss Higgins with The Sea Takes Me Away, which is part of her new podcast and album, The Fire Waltz, based on her great-grandmother's diaries, photos, postcards, and letters as she tried to make it across the North Atlantic during World War I and then across Canada. Little Miss Higgins is currently touring the Fire Waltz live across Western Canada. And the Fire Waltz podcast is what you need to add to your listening for this week. I'm Grant Lawrence for CBC Music. I'll check in with you again soon.
Coming up, a somber anniversary. 50 years ago, Ismaili Muslims were exiled from Uganda. Hello there, and welcome back to Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Now, thousands of South Asian Canadians are marking a traumatic anniversary. 50 years since their expulsion from Uganda. So the families and communities survived that ordeal, and they started over here in Canada. This is their story.
One coffee, anybody for tea? Perfect.
Thank you. We were 3 generations Ugandans. My mother was born there and I was born there. So I was an automatic Ugandan citizen.
Shuffled among a lifetime of photos and mementos, one stands out.
This was a liberation dinner.
Salim Ahmed shaking hands with Idi Amin, then known as the liberator of Uganda.
For me, I've grown up hearing the stories of Idi Amin, and I can't imagine what it's like to now look back at this.
When I look at it, my blood boils because, all the memories about the lives that were lost there, people who lost their lives because of what things that he did, and for why. This is at the store.
Salim and his wife Leila were successful store owners in the capital Kampala.
These have been harsh and terrible days for the Indian merchants.
Until 50 years ago, 1972, when Amin announced all South Asians must leave the country. He wanted a pure Uganda.
President Idi Amin has broken the Asian stranglehold on his country's economy by booting out the Indian and Pakistani nationals.
I want to see that the whole Kampala street is not full of Indians. It must be proper black, and administration in those shops is run by the Ugandan.
Tens of thousands expelled, many left with little, and 90 days to get out.
They left behind vast fortunes, factories, stores, autos, homes, and jewelry, totaling perhaps $200 million. But while they were accumulating...
What's going through your heart and mind?
My heart is beating very hard because, as I say, we, Leila and I, used to find that people you're talking to one day, next day they disappeared.
More than 7,000 South Asians came to Canada, the first non-European mass settlement in this country, thanks in part to Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau's friendship with His Highness the Aga Khan, spiritual leader of the Ismailis. The couple started their life in Vancouver with 30 British pounds each.
2-3 jobs together, like weekends, and just to make ends meet.
I've never seen you overcome with emotion.
Yeah.
What does it feel like reflecting right now?
Very, very thankful.
What struck me most while hearing those stories was that some countries initially refused entrance to those expelled, while Canada was one of the countries that sent pilots to get people out.
Hi, Zara.
Tom Mole's father, Captain Gordon Mole, was one of the pilots who volunteered to fly planes full of refugees out of Entebbe.
It's exactly what he would have gone to Uganda with, 4-engine.
And on one of the last flights out, things got scary. Gunshots were heard nearby.
What did he tell you about that flight there and back, that really dangerous one you mentioned?
It was kind of a life and death situation, and it put him in a spot where he had to actually do a takeoff from a high, heavy airplane. They had no choice, though, because people's lives were on the line. He said they got to the end of the runway, still about 20 knots lower than they should have been for flying speed, but no choice, and he did, put all his years of experience to play, and rotated, and the airplane didn't take off so much as the runway finished, and they just kept going.
Tom's father received a citation of bravery from Prime Minister Stephen Harper in 2013 for his role in the evacuation before passing away 3 years ago.
Sorry, it's a bit emotional for me. It just worked out.
Once those planes safely landed in Canada, new lives could begin.
I had convinced myself that I would never make it out of Uganda alive, and my father had to wrench me away and force me into the car.
Nazlan Ramthullah was 17 when the evacuation order was made. 40 years later, she wrote about it in this book.
How do you heal from there?
I don't think you ever heal. I think like anything else, you learn to cope with it, and some memories will fade and others will stay. It was therapeutic, cathartic, I don't know what you might say, but I've written about it and it's over. Like, let me put that away. There's me.
Nazanin went back to reclaim some of her family's assets in the 90s, her old homeland scarred by years of civil war.
You just had to look around you and the country is decimated. And you look at it and you think, is this what one madman, Idi Amin, did? The country had sunk, I think, what they say, 60 years behind times.
That chapter, now closed, she reflects on her life in Canada.
So I'm very, very thankful, very lucky, and I would just hope that in some way I can pay this forward in some manner to other people, other immigrants who are coming into this country.
Thank you for coming.
Salim, Layla, and their friends prospered here, built their community, but they remember the struggle.
At the beginning, it was quite difficult to buy a car, and then the next step is to buy a house.
How does that feel knowing we're opening our doors?
The current refugees have a much tougher time than what we went through. We didn't go through a war to get here, you know.
And there are more and more refugees anyways, because how are we going to accommodate?
Every day in our morning and evening prayers, we say special prayers for all the refugees and migrant workers, because when you see that, it is very, very painful. We are very fortunate that we got the opportunity. What can be done? Right?
Listening to these stories gave me a new appreciation of turning tragedy into opportunity and doing it all with grace. That builds community. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
Coming up, a Vancouver coffee roaster dishes on what's brewing this fall season. Hi, welcome back to Our Vancouver. I'm Gloria Makarenko. Well, grab your favorite cup of joe and then judge it against what Vancouver coffee roaster Andrea Beckham has to say about fall's latest brews. Margaret Gallagher spoke with the Palette Coffee Roaster on the CBC Afternoon radio show On the Coast.
Green coffee, as we call it, unroasted coffee. We get it from a variety of sources, but when it comes to us, we roast, we tend to roast about a 10 kilogram batch at a time. But basically, we take it through the roasting process, which is not dissimilar from, say, baking bread or grilling a steak. We have to turn it brown somehow. And so we do that, obviously, by applying quite a lot of heat. And the roasting process is fairly well controlled. That's what the roaster does, the roaster, the machine, and the roaster, the person. And so, once we get the coffee, we try to make the coffee taste the best for each coffee. There are a couple different kinds of roasters, but the kind we roast on is a big steel drum, and for us, natural gas heat is applied underneath the roaster drum itself, and then that heats the air inside the roaster, and the hot air is primarily what roasts the coffee.
Okay, and how do you decide what is the right roast for the right bean?
We do quite a bit of testing. We'll do some sample roasting, see how the bean responds to heat, and then I'll do a pilot roast, which means I take a fairly small batch size, and I'll see what the coffee does. And I know based on the processing of the coffee and based on the variety of the coffee, the country it comes from, a bunch of different factors. I can kind of predict how the coffee might respond to the heat, but then when I go through my pilot roast, I'll actually see it with a readout from a software program, and then I can adjust from there to see what tastes best. Some of it is definitely science. Knowing how beans take heat is science. Knowing how the roaster works is kind of a lot of science, but also kind of having an intuition for how certain beans respond to heat, or having a lot of experience. It's more apprenticeship style with learning to roast. And so it's kind of a really nice marriage of art and science. I actually came from a career in neuroscience research. And when I stopped doing that, I wanted to do something with science, but something that really made me happy and that I really loved. So I went to coffee. And I worked as a barista for a few years, and then I got got to know some of the people in the Vancouver coffee community, and that's how I got hired on at Palette. And our director of coffee is the one who hired me, and he, had tasted coffee that I had brewed at a competition, and he was really interested in bringing me on board as an apprentice roaster, and now a couple of years later, I'm the head roaster. You kind of get an intuition for how certain roasters roast coffees, also what kind of coffees they source, like if it's from certain countries or if it's certain varietals. We play this big game right now called Leaderboard Coffee Project, and you basically get 10 blind coffees, and you have to guess a bunch of things about them, or educated guess, a bunch of stuff, a bunch of statistics about them. And so you can learn a lot just by tasting lots of coffees over and over. So you learn like certain coffees from certain countries taste certain ways. And so when you have those kinds of tools at your disposal in your palate, you can kind of start to guess, well, this kind of tastes the way that this company roasts, or the way that this person roasts, or even different kinds of roasting styles in different countries around the world.
So it's like terroir.
Yeah, it absolutely is like terroir. Coffee and wine are not dissimilar at all. I don't do any home roasting personally because I do it at work all the time. But I think it's a lot of fun. There's a lot you can learn about sourcing coffee, a lot you can learn about how coffee is roasted and then how that affects brewing. And I think home roasting is really fun. You can always tell when somebody comes into a cafe and is really into coffee, and home roasting absolutely contributes to that love of coffee. The home roasters are a lot of fun. There's loads of different ways. I mean, you can do it with a popcorn popper if you want to. Sustainability is really important, I think, to most people in the specialty coffee industry. And sustainability hits at a bunch of different levels of coffee. Obviously, sourcing is going to be one of the biggest ones. And sustainable coffee can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. One of the ways that we at Palette define sustainability, I suppose, is we have personal relationships with producers and farmers. And while we still go through an importer so that we can, store the large volumes of coffee that we buy from them, we are able to contact producers directly, and we can make sure that they get paid a more than fair price for their coffees, because investing in producers, investing in farmers means they can reinvest that in both quality and production, but primarily they also invest it in a community building. And so they can provide housing for their workers, or they're basically reinvesting in the companies at the origin location. I absolutely that's one of my favorite things about being in coffee, honestly, is the coffee community. Vancouver has a fantastic coffee community. It's fairly small, which can be a nice place to start, but because Canada is, even though we're geographically large, our numbers are fairly small, we tend to know people in the Toronto coffee community, lots of places on the East Coast, especially in Calgary and Edmonton. There's huge coffee communities there, and the best part is we all kind of know each other or know of each other. And so, we will get coffees from all over Canada. And when it comes to competition season, which it is right now, we all get to spend more time together. And so it's really fun to get to hang out with people in different coffee communities and share coffees and share stories and recipes. Yeah, the coffee community is one of the absolute best parts about coffee, in my opinion.
When we bring you stories here at CBC Vancouver, we have award-winning photographers out capturing the images that say so much, because the still images, they can add a different type of context and understanding to an event or an issue. So here are some of the latest from what happened this past week. And that's all for our Vancouver for this week. I hope you can join me weekday afternoons on CBC Radio 1 for On the Coast. Until then, goodbye.